I have seen people come and go over the years who, like today, hey, I'm the NFT guy. And then a year later, I'm the AI guy. And 6 months later, I'm the funnel guy. I think over time they lose credibility because they're just going to pivot in 6 months. I just launched a book that details what I've learned in my career working between marketing and sales. Maybe my tilt is I'm the person with sales and marketing expertise, but I understand how content can be used for sales and marketing.
Welcome to Marketing by Design, where you and I learned from our favorite founders and marketers on how they built their success and told their stories by design. I am your host, Andy Milligan. Let's get started. Hello, what is happening, my friends, and welcome back to another powerful episode of Marketing by Design. Today, you and I are learning from the one and only A. Lee Judge. A. Lee is the founder of Content Monster. He's a professional speaker, and he is an all in all an expert on all things sales, content, and marketing. The dude has been in the game for 2.5 decades. Also, the author of this thing right here, Cash, the 4 keys to better sales, smarter marketing, and a supercharged revenue machine. My copy is a little bit worse for the wear, but that's just proof that I actually read it. So shout out to Lee for writing an awesome book. Lee is someone that I met at CEX earlier or late last year in Cleveland, Ohio. He was actually one of the speakers at this event, and I was just blown away with his eloquence, his verbal agility, and all in all, his expertise across all things sales, marketing, and content, which, and we'll talk about in this episode, I don't think there's a lot of qualified voices who can really speak between all three of these. You guys know how it is if you spend your time in the echo chamber of LinkedIn. People pretend to be an expert in absolutely everything, but this guy literally has job roles of high status within all of these areas. So he's gone off and done it on his own, and he's created a really cool niche tying these three things together. In this episode, you and I are going to learn from Lee about how he's managed to juggle all three of these things from his own career standpoint. Being a unicorn is not easy, and Lee can speak to it front and center. Today, we are going to be covering the cash framework and how you can use it. We're going to learn how to turn sales objections into actual conversations and things that you can use to actually accelerate the process rather than them just being a complete stopgap. We're also going to talk about how to use these conversations to promote your best content and use it to affect all the three areas we've just talked about. So that is all from me. I'm super excited to share this conversation with A. Lee Judge. Before we do, I have a quick resource to share just with you marketers. Big news, we just did a light rebrand and relaunched our own website. In commemoration of that, I want to share with you the ultimate website's visual swipe file. We've compiled over 100 of the highest performing landing pages and websites into just a filterable swipe file that you can browse the next time you need web design inspiration. The majority of website redesigns fail because you don't start from a place that's proven to work. I have fixed that problem for you, and that'll be in the first link below. Check out our partners at Cohatch. You can get 2 free weeks of co-working at a premium location if you are in Ohio or if you're in Atlanta. That's something that I wish I had. I paid for it right away. But MBD listeners get 2 free weeks of co-working if you are near a Cohatch. Cannot recommend them enough. Done wonders for my business, and it can for yours as well. And that is all from me. Let's get into this episode. This is entry 145 of Marketing by Design. Please welcome A. Lee Judge to the show.
So I've always been a creative, even before the term creator was a term. Ever since high school, creating photos and videos and audio. I was a professional DJ for years. I did radio. I toured and did clubs as a DJ. But all that time, I also ran it as a business. DJing wasn't just a hobby. It was, once I got to college, I had 3 DJ sets, employees. You could be doing a frat party, a wedding, and a bar mitzvah all the same night. So it was a true business. And I was marketing that business. I wouldn't have called myself a marketer, but that's what I was doing. I was looking at, ads and flyers and target audience and what audience paid for this and paid more or less. So I was definitely deep into marketing. I just didn't know it. So I was doing some music production, moved to Atlanta because of the music industry, pursued radio, but also got offered a job as a marketer, which is my first marketing job with a title anyway. And I got that job because I knew how to build customer databases, but I was building them for my DJ company. I ended up building it for a company I worked for now. And so here goes this path where I always told my bosses, I'll take this job, but I am an entrepreneur and I always will be. And they were okay with that. I ended up being with them for 12 years because
Huh.
they never squashed my side hustle. And so during that 12 years, I learned marketing, got my foothold as a marketer, but also grew my creative businesses. And then my second company I went to, I told them the same thing. I got a side hustle, a side business. They didn't squash it either. I began speaking on marketing. I launched my company Content Monster, which that was a case where I was a marketing director. I needed some video for the company I worked for. It was a technology company, and I needed to get it from the technologists, the salespeople who were creating the content, the product rather. And so I said, you know what? Rather than go out to an agency, I'll just do it myself. I know how to do it. I have video experience, so I created video, and other companies said, "Hey, Lee, I like what you did with this company for their content. Can you do that for us? Is there a conflict of interest?" And I said, "Oh, no." I said, first they said, actually, was it an agency or was it in house? I said, well, kind of both. I'm in house, but I did it myself as an agency.
Uh-huh.
So once that happened, I actually launched Content Monster to do business content for other companies. And so today, Content Monster is my one lane, promoting this content marketing agency that creates podcasts and video content for businesses. And then I'm still a marketer. Just launched a book that kind of details what I've learned in my career working between marketing and sales. And so there's the two challenges I have. The challenge actually is this personal brand who's an expert between sales and marketing, who does keynote speeches and training, and then this company that does creative stuff in the content marketing world. There's the
Mm,
long and short of it.
yeah, that's what I learned from interviewing a lot of authors is that they're usually pretty good at telling their stories, which I appreciate because it makes it easy on me. But if I were to go back and your your first role there all throughout even throughout the whole chapters, if I were to ask you, say before you started the 12 years job role, how would you have identified yourself? Say I met you for the first time. If you had to put yourself into we do that classic marketing exercise of a white box ICP, how would you describe yourself and how self-aware of you were you back then compared to now?
Well, I wasn't as self-aware, so the answer probably wouldn't have been accurate. At that time, I would have said I was a creative entrepreneur because I was a DJ and I took it seriously as a business. And the things I did to run that business were things that were also attractive to the corporate world. The creative part of it, the analytic part of it, the database creation, customer journey part of it. That was things that I didn't yet have defined. I didn't have the corporate lingo, the jargon to define the things that I was doing. I built customer databases. I didn't know they were called CRMs or customer relationship management systems. That wasn't a part of my vocabulary. I was just building databases using a program. I didn't know what the program was. I was using MySQL. I wouldn't have told you I could code. I wouldn't have told you I knew what a CRM was. In fact, the second job that I got, I was avoiding anything that said Salesforce as a requirement. If it said you must know CRMs, I would have avoided that. I was avoiding that. But luckily, the CEO who interviewed me, had a technology background and he knew exactly what I knew. I didn't know I knew it, but he knew I knew it.
Uh,
And he knew that if I had built at that point 7 CRMs, and he knew I'd done that. I just knew I built these databases. So he
uh,
knew that if I could do that, I could run Salesforce. And so the first week of my hire, there's like, oh, by the way, you're the new Salesforce administrator. I was like, what? But it worked out. It was the launch of another part of my career where, excuse me, where it put me between sales and marketing for the next 15 years.
mm. I think that speaks a lot to the value of having other people that can identify, because we all get a lot of fish in water, especially when we talk to a lot of founders on this show, where the value lies in terms of your experience, your career, what your business is. That is really a reflection of what people are saying back to you. And what I hear from that is, especially when, we're young and we're kind of circling the plane on what that value prop is for us, how we brand ourselves. A lot of times it's taking testimonials. It's the feedback that our employers are telling us, our trusted partners, people that are seeing things that we aren't, and we're kind of in the weeds sometimes of just getting better at what we do. It's not a very typical exercise. A lot of the listeners are in marketing, so it's a lot of times they identify a lot with that very specific job title, whether it's content creator, like the stuff you were doing, more analytical databases, they very much tie themselves to that. And I think almost to a detriment, because
Yeah.
when you do that, you have the advantage of you have some sense of clarity, but it doesn't present the opportunities to where I see someone like you who now has a personal brand side leaning into both areas of the professional and also the creative route. I think leaning into that is one of your biggest differentiators. But in the beginning, it takes a lot of feedback from other people. Like I said, we're all kind of circling the plane of what that looks like for us. But
I think there's a message there for employers too, because each employer that knew I had a side hustle and I had side entrepreneurial ventures, they didn't squash that. And what happened is I did a lot of learning and getting of experience that was not on their dime. In other words, I learned website development because my business needed a website. And I began
Mhm,
building for other companies. But I was, once I got off the job, I was still studying web development. And then I ended up
mhm,
developing their website and they benefited from that free training. My speaking experience, I would go to a conference to speak, but I would also go to learn and bring that knowledge back to their company. So if they had squashed that, they wouldn't have got all that free training, all that experience from the world that came back to the company had they squashed what I was doing. So it's a benefit for an
yeah.
employer as well to nurture their employees' desires in terms of entrepreneurship and their creative ventures.
Let's double click on that. So how are you have you had an experience where to now that you are a founder that you're able to instill that and maybe some of your hires and people that you choose to bring on and really kind of amplify your bigger vision?
Absolutely. I mean, I always say if you have free time, or especially we say, hey, on Friday, find a new tool, test a new tool. Or if someone says, hey, Lee, just heard about like Nano Banana, for example. I'm like, great, make something with it. So what can it do? Test the limits. Our own podcast, my podcast, which is called The Business of Marketing, we use that as a testing ground for things before we introduce it to our clients or into our client workflows. And it's always, hey, try it, test it. One of our producers has his own podcast. I'm like, hey, do your own podcast, experiment on all the tools you want because you're going to learn something in your own podcast we can use here. So, yeah, I'm all for experimentation. Um, I jumped on ChatGPT as soon as it was available and said, hey guys, here's an account for you. Learn it, use Midjourney, use Nano Banana, use all the AI we can get our hands on because it also keeps our clientele from having to test it. Like I can confidently say what you should use, what you shouldn't use, what's a waste of time, and save our clients from wasting time chasing after those shiny objects. But from an employee standpoint, yeah, I'm all in for playing and experimenting.
Sort of. I love that, by the way. Um, I think back to one of my first internship directors was 100% the same way, and this is how I learned to do everything on the job. And I look back at that role. Not just do I look back on it very fondly, but I see the other side of it now being a founder, and I realize how unproductive that his approach was of saying that to me. Like he gave me way too much autonomy, but looking at the 10 to 20 years after and how that's manifested in my career, that's one of the things I'm most grateful for. But kind of keeping us on the track of the dual strengths framework here. What I want you to kind of look back at your past, like everything that we've talked about so far. Did it ever feel like when was the first time that you kind of realized, okay, I'm taking stock here? And I know we had a conversation at CEX where you had the book that was on a different topic than what you were speaking about.
Yeah.
And it shows dual expertise to me as someone who's there as an attendee and there to learn from the people that are up there on stage. But talk to me about when that realization came to you where you're like, okay, I have these two expertise. They're kind of diverged a little bit. And when that really came into fruition for your mind and how we're thinking about, if you could point that back
Yeah.
to one specific moment.
I can actually. I'll say one and a half specific moments. So, um, whenever I was the founder leading Content Monster, that founder brand matched the company. So that wasn't a split yet. But once I left corporate and wanted to write this book about my corporate experience, that was very different from the creative agency. And so as I wrote the book, I'm nearing completion of the book. And I meet someone who was following me on social media and said, hey, I want to introduce you to my son. And he said, hey, this is the podcast guy. He knows all about podcasts. I'm like, I'm the
Uh,
podcast guy? Why does he think that? Well, the content that he saw me make on YouTube or on LinkedIn was a lot about podcasting and promoting what Content Monster does. And I was like, I don't really want to be known as the podcast guy. And I'm writing this book about sales and marketing, a very corporate level type book. And I think the real moment was I began giving speeches on the book's topic. The book is called CASH, which stands for Communication, Alignment, Systems, and Honesty. Those are the 4 areas where I saw businesses break down between sales and marketing. And I began giving that speech about a year or so before the book came out. And I remember one of my mentors, Mark Schaefer, he has a book called Known that I read years ago. And since reading the book, I've gotten to actually meet Mark, and now I call him a friend. We hang out and we talk or whatever. So he's a mentor that I can actually reach out to and talk to. So that day, one of my speeches about a year ago, Mark was in the audience, which was kind of intimidating that my mentors in the audience watching me or whatever. And after the speech, he complimented how well the speech was. And he says to me, I really love this new personal brand pivot you've made. I was like, personal brand pivot? I said, oh boy, here we go again. I was like, he sees me as the sales and marketing expert that I just presented on stage as, but yet I still have content monster content that I want to lead that agency. And so that's when I realized, that was the moment I realized that, wow, I've got a very split personal brand. But over the past year, I don't have it solved yet. I'll tell you that I'm still trying to work it out. But over the past year, other mentors and peers like Mark have said, maybe the convergence of the 2 things you do is your unique value, your tilt, as Joe Pulizzi would call it. Maybe my tilt is I'm the person with sales and marketing expertise, but I understand how content can be used for sales and marketing. So I'm trying to figure out how to work on that right now. That's the lane I'm trying to craft, to say, you won't talk to any other person who understands how to do sales and marketing with content better than me, because I live in both lanes. I'm an expert on content marketing. I'm an expert on sales and marketing alignment. So let's use content to bring your sales and marketing teams together. That's the workshop I'm working on right now. I don't quite have that elevator pitch worked out yet, but I've been told that if I can bring those 2 things together, that might be my unique position.
Yeah. What I hear from you is that, and we kind of touched base on this off in our last chat, but I think you're very self-aware, so you're able to point to specific moments where you got a lot of fulfillment from the feedback of others, and you didn't let that actually steer your path, which I think is the danger of what a lot of people do. I know sometimes, like, flattery for me is a hell of a drug, and when someone tells me or compliments me on something, I'm like, man, like, that's what I want to identify. I throw myself into that thing because of the validation from other people, and I see a lot of people doing that. I hear someone who is very self-aware on, this is the moment that I recognize this in myself via that feedback from other people. Another thing too is, kind of branching off our last chat, was how you build this asset of yourself throughout all of these different chapters, right? You have the professional background, you have the alignment of sales and marketing, and you also have the creative. A lot of people feel switching costs when there's not this efficient line from A to B, and they're kind of taking like this winding route, when in life you can only see by the light that's ahead of you and like your headlights, right? Which is something that a lot of people don't think about. You can't see what that thing is in the future, and you're really just you're not shooting from the hip, but you have to be self-aware in those moments when people do get value from you, to take it as feedback, but not throw your personality into it 100%.
Well, you
But
just gave me some insight there, because I am happy that I'm only in 2 lanes and I'm deep in both of those lanes. Because I have seen people come and go over the years who they were shallow in, like today, hey, I'm the NFT guy. And then a year later, I'm the AI guy. And 6 months later, I'm the funnel guy. Like, I think over time they lose credibility, because they're just going to pivot in 6 months. Like, whatever's the next hot thing they're going to pivot on. And so I guess I can say, even though I'm still working it out, I'm blessed that at least those 2 lanes, one, they're both deep. I mean, my content marketing background is deep. My sales and marketing background is deep. If I can tie those together, great. But if I can't, at least no one's going to say Lee was shallow on either one of those things. I have proof to back them up on On the sales and marketing side, I have a whole book. On the content marketing
Uh-huh.
side, I have an agency that's been around for years. So they both have deep roots. And whether or not I ever bring those together or not, maybe I don't even have to, but I'd like to.
Mhm. I think a good maybe exercise for how we can, and I'm always doing this for our own business. I encourage the listeners to do this for their own businesses as well, is where in your funnel do both of these sort of fit? I think because it's a very good exercise and mindset to have that, like I said, we are building the asset that is ourselves. Like, say, Lee goes and gives a speech on any topic, right? He's in front of an audience of 400 or 500 people and he's speaking about his book. You're speaking about sales and marketing alignment. That sales leader that's listening who is running Salesforce in their organization, they have a video department as well in their company. Maybe they're Fortune 500, maybe they're a startup. They see Lee on stage. They're able to see his intonation. They're able to see, okay, like, wow, this guy actually knows his stuff a little bit. You benefit from that because you still have the, I think Jay Klaus called it, I was listening on the show yesterday, he called it horizontal integration, where you serve the same audience, but on multiple touch points. So you could be the sales and marketing referral guy. You could be the sales and marketing expert for a company. And then that benefits Content Monster because you could also provide those services for them as well.
I
Tell
think
me
we've,
about,
I've
go
done
ahead.
that some because whenever we have some clients who they may come to us and say, we need content, we need a content machine, we need a podcast or video. And I think we have probably won some deals based on the fact that we can say, slow down, you need a strategy. Here's our expertise in marketing or in sales to help you build a strategy to make sure that the content you use actually drives your business. That makes us different from people who say, we're a production company, we'll produce this asset, hand it to you, and walk away. So I think maybe
Mhm.
that's the beginning of bringing those two things together.
Yeah. What do you think is the most efficient version of that to where you are the trusted resource in an organization that could be leaned on for either or both? What do you think is the most efficient method, whether it's in your content, whether it's in where you're spending your time at conferences, the next book that you write? What are some of your ideas for doubling down on that?
Well, I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress, but I can say that, like the example a moment ago, if we're selling content marketing, think that the reason why I began my agency was because when I was the executive hiring content agencies or getting video or audio projects done, the problem was they didn't know why, as a marketer, I needed this content. They would just look at their scope of work and do whatever we told them to do, no pushback, no help in terms of marketing or sales to do it with. They just said, okay, you want a 2 minute video, here's the specs, here's your file, they walk away. I wish they understood why I wanted that content made. So when I created Content Monster, my goal was to have an agency who understood and said, okay, we hear you want this. Why do you want this? How will it benefit your business? How will you use it to make sure you get the full ROI out of it? And it's funny when we talk to customers, just when I began talking that business ease, that business jargon, I think they light up. I know they light up because they go, oh, they're not talking about cameras and video. They're talking about business uses for this content. That separates us. So that's the one place when we're looking at Content Monster, I love to step in. In fact, if the person on the call is VP or above, I join the call, the sales call, because I can speak the language that the VP and the CMO and the CEO need to hear. I can speak their language versus creative language. On the other side, from the sales and marketing standpoint, the first part of the book is about communication, and a lot of that is about content. And so I think as I'm talking to this audience, which is typically VP and up, typically when I advise them, is, look, you need to have more content to help drive your funnel. I'm speaking their language, but they also know, okay, well, if he says you need more content, he's not coming from a shallow place. He actually knows content and he can help us actually execute on the idea. So that's what I'm hoping
Mhm.
I can do with those two places. Again, still a work in progress.
Dude, we all are. So, I think I love how, like, seriously, and this is real talk, and a lot of people that get on stages and have books aren't as forward in admitting that we're all on the journey of this stuff together. So, I appreciate that, and I think the listeners will as well. But I want to zoom in like 30% here. And that may have been an arbitrary number, but I want to zoom in a little bit here. What does your day to day look like? And if you could be on self aware on this, is where are you kind of happiest in, like, where do you feel happiest, like, in your day to day? Like, what are the inputs that make you feel like you're doing the right thing, even though there are, some conflicting experiences? Where are you happiest?
I enjoy creating things like what we're doing right now. I enjoy talking. In fact, in the speech you probably saw, I showed a video of this is my happy place, and it's right here
Hmm.
in the studio. I enjoy creating content, whether it's having a conversation, creating a YouTube video for my YouTube channel. I enjoy creating content. And I have to actually keep myself from working on client stuff because my editors are like, Lee, you don't need to edit this. You have people to edit this client.
Hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, there's this audio thing I want to try or this new tool I want to try. Like, no, Lee, we need you to work on the contract or getting new business. We don't need you to create. The
Yeah.
only creative I'm allowed to do is like this podcast, my own podcast, being a guest on podcast, YouTube channel stuff, founder led content. Outside of that, I'm not allowed to create. But I'll tell you
Hmm.
this though, to keep myself from doing the things that I like versus what I need to do, which is something that entrepreneurs have a problem with, is I made up this acronym for how I go about my day, and I call it the POD method, POD. The P is for perpetual work, the O is for outreach, and the D is for deadline. And so every day I
Huh.
make sure I touch one of those three. Perpetual work is, let's say I update a web page. When I'm done with that, that page lives on and keeps working, right? If I do a podcast episode, that podcast or that video for YouTube is done. It goes on YouTube. It keeps working perpetually. Without me, it's when I'm sleeping, it's still working. Outreach is what I'm doing right now. Talking
Right.
with somebody in the industry, making a connection. It could be a sales call. It's talking with someone outside of my space, I work from home. So outreach is important.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then deadline is there's typically a speech that I have coming up or travel or a keynote that I have to get the deck turned in for. That's my deadline. So every day I go, okay, have you done perpetual work, outreach work, and deadline work? If I can check all three, then I feel good. I'm a productivity junkie, so I want to make sure I get things
Hmm.
done each day. But if I can check all three of those boxes, I feel pretty good about a day.
Yeah. Love that, man. You and I both, by the way, productivity junkie. Um, Something I want to double click on that you said there too is, first of all, I love that. Like, it's a very succinct acronym. I think a lot of people, and definitely myself as well, you start, and this is something that Andy Crescedina and I talked about too, is how he starts his day with creative work. And
Mm,
creative work is very blurry defined wise, but if you start your day putting out fires and doing urgent but not creative tasks, that's going to eat up your whole day. It was very much the case for me this morning, and I think a lot of times it's hard to balance like your natural what you want to do, especially when there's no one telling us what to do, man. Like, that's
yeah,
kind of the founder cross to bear, is like you don't have anyone that's telling you what the right thing to do is. All you can do is trust yourself and really just place those constant bets. One thing that you said there with the P in that analogy, the perpetual work, is I listened to one of James Clear's interviews. He talked about how, like, every piece that he publishes, every podcast he's on, every book, he's someone that views his writing as the product of his business, which is a very healthy mindset to take, which not a lot of authors I don't think take. Is he's casting like all these lottery tickets with all these appearances, podcast appearances, books, newsletters, and he was one of these days, one of those is gonna, to cash in,
yeah.
to no pun intended. But you've mentioned the book a couple times. I want you to kind of take me through each of those four: communications, alignment, systems, and honesty. Got it memorized.
Hmm.
Four.
Thanks.
And talk to me like how each of those have played out, not just in your career, but I think it's really helpful as we do this exercise to um, see where it's led us to.
Okay. So the quick backstory of that is I was when I took this particular position at a software company, and it was a marketing job, but he said, well, look, you have Salesforce, you're the Salesforce admin. Your job is to get sales to use Salesforce and to work closer with marketing to drive business forward. And he threw me in the middle of sales and marketing. And the problem is, salespeople don't like to listen to marketers. So I was in a
Mhm.
real odd position, but it worked out because I dug into understanding their world. And it turns out after this is like a 15-year span of being in this position from that job to another company I also worked in, got put in the same position. I got hired because I understood that position. Through those years, I realized between sales and marketing, there were four areas that whenever they broke down or didn't help drive business, it was because of these four things. And it just so happened when I rearranged those four things, it spelled out the word cash, which is the great word for sales and marketing
Hmm.
to look at, right?
Yeah.
So the communication part, C is for cash, and it is how sales and marketing need to communicate to each other because just on a high level, the best content that marketing create can create comes from the knowledge of sales. Sales on the front line, they're talking to customers, they know what the problems are, they know what their objections are from customers. That makes for great content. And at the same time, marketing needs to make sure that sales knows about all the great content they're creating. I saw cases where there were web pages and white papers and videos that sales didn't even know about. Marketing checked the box. We created this content, we put it out into the world, but the salesperson is out there in the field and doesn't even know he has this asset. So that's the communication part. The alignment part is we're often measured by different things. I believe in there should be a revenue team, one team, just like offense and defense of the same team that works with the same measurement tools. But the problem is there's no alignment there. Marketing is measuring sometimes fluffy stuff like likes and views and social stuff instead of actual being involved in the sales measurement, like funnel velocity. How fast are we closing deals? Do we have the right customers? What's the value of each customer? So I think I've written a lot about creating these key performance indicators that cover both sales and marketing so they're aligned when they go out to do business. So that's the C and the A. A is alignment. The S is systems. So I mentioned I was a marketing operations manager running Salesforce and running all the marketing software like Marketo and Pardot. So all those systems that I dealt with, I often saw that sales didn't know what was in the marketing systems and marketing didn't know what was in the sales systems. They didn't have licenses to each. I've had cases where marketing had one set of data on a customer, sales had a new set of data on a customer. It was the same person with one customer journey, but they didn't know it was the same person. So you got a salesperson saying, "Hey, have you heard of our product?" And the customer's like, "Yeah, I was on your website. I went to webinars at your trade show." That's marketing data that sales didn't know about. So that's the
Mm.
systems. Like, what are you doing amongst your people part of the system and your software part of the system to work together? And then finally, H for honesty is what are the goals you're actually working for? If you're in marketing and your only goal is to say, "Hey, we had X number of visitors to our trade show booth," or "we have so many MQLs, marketing qualified leads." If you're touting that and you're patting yourself on the shoulder saying we did that, honestly, what is it doing for the business? Are you measuring within yourself, your own needs or your own department without the business being the goal? In the same time, sales will say, "Hey, we won this deal all by ourselves." No deal today is won by just marketing or just sales. Sales needed marketing to be a part of that process. And so let's be honest, sales, you didn't close that deal by yourself. Marketing was a part of that. And at a larger scale, that's part of the culture of the company. The company should teach a culture that sales and marketing are part of one revenue team. So there's a thing: communication, alignment, systems, honesty. The book goes into all four of those parts and helps the salespeople, the marketers, and their leaders understand how to work better together to drive revenue for the business.
Talk to me about how you explain that same philosophy to someone who's doing all the jobs. Say we have a hypothetical, I think something we're starting to see a lot more of is the isolation and these smaller consultancy led companies who are performing and they're getting their foot into the doors with larger clients and larger organizations, but they're objectively their job title overlaps a lot of these sales marketing roles. How would you I think a really good exercise too is listing out like everything you do in a J and attaching that to a job role. So saying, okay, I'm putting on my sales hat right now, and I'm putting on my marketing hat right now, I'm putting on my fulfillment hat, and sort of aligning each steps of these framework. But have you ever had to, when you're giving this keynote or when you're presenting it to a company, had to distill it down and think, okay, this is how maybe something like this applies to not just broadly and specifically a team, sales and marketing teams, but to maybe more of a solo led founder who's doing all of the things that overlap the four pieces here?
Yeah, and I think you kind of answered that. I mean, it's once you understand the pieces, then you can decide what hat you're putting on. And, me as we're a small agency, I wear all those hats at some point. Like when I make a
Mm.
YouTube video, I am the creative person on the marketing team. What video do I make? I make a video based on an objection I heard yesterday on a sales call. So if I'm on a sales call with my sales hat on, and a VP of marketing says, "Well, we want to do a podcast, but we're thinking about should we do video or not, or just audio because video might cost more, and I don't know if I should do that or not." Okay, that's a topic. Take that topic, write a script, do a YouTube video about that. So here I am on both sides, right? I'm also thinking like a CFO, like, is it even efficient for us to keep offering audio podcasts when we know that video podcasts work better for us and for our customer? So, but it takes an
Mm,
understanding of all those hats. And so when I look at my experience between sales and marketing and all those hats, yes, I put them on and off as what's needed. And if I were someone who was in a smaller company reading my book, I would read the whole thing and say, well, I don't have a sales team or marketing team,
mm.
but I understand what the functions are and how to operate in those functions when needed.
Yeah, maybe it's this kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. We weren't really intending to do that, but maybe the packaging of like both sides of the experience is using it from a perspective of a leaner and small team. And this is how you scale your impact by um being more effective and having multiple roles. So maybe your unique value prop, your tilt as you called it, is saying, okay, these are all the jobs to be done. This is how you align and scale your impact, being smaller and using that to your advantage. Because you even talked about, I think, the self awareness of you when you're putting on all these different hats as a solo founder, you can recognize and tie that back to your past job roles, your past experience, and say, okay, this is where I'm thriving. And you can kind of put yourself back in that seat and think a little bit more third person in that. I think that's, I mean, to a founder like me and like a lot of the solo marketers and consultants that are probably listening, that's how they can more resonate with it and think, okay, this is how like maybe our clients or our bigger organizations are thinking when they do this. What's my version of that? What is the salesperson within me? What is the marketer within me? And how are these two parts of me not so torn, you know? I think
Yeah, I
being
think it's
self-aware on that is a
important
really big piece.
for the entrepreneur to have those views. And me, luckily, I've actually been in those positions. So, like after a sales call, if I'm on it, I may say to my team, look, okay, the VP of marketing just came in there and he was deferring to the CMO who mentioned the CFO. So let me tell you what's going on. I can tell them I know what happens when the phone hangs up, when the Zoom call is over, because I've been in those boardrooms before. I've been in those conference rooms, and I can say, okay, here's what their concerns are. Here's what we just heard. They said this, but this is how it works inside corporate. That's experience that I have to
Mm,
share in my business that if we were just audio video production, we wouldn't know these things. So
mm,
in lieu of me having the actual experience in corporate, I think if I was just an agency or just a creative entrepreneur, I would try to spend some time either in those circles with corporate people or having conversations. Like, for example, you do web design. If you do design for businesses or for corporations, I would say, hey, CMO, tell me about your day. What are your concerns? Or make a chat GPT ideal customer and say, my ideal customer is a CMO. What are you concerned with? What resonates with you? If you write an article, run that article by that CMO and say, does this resonate? And if you're too creative, it'll say, I'm a CMO. I don't care about color palettes. It's going to say, I care about
mm,
what's the ROI on my website? How can it boost
mm.
traffic? How can boosted traffic equate to boosting business? The language is going to be different. So whether you have the experience like I do, I think you need to understand there are key experiences outside of your core business that would help for you to know.
Yeah, that's sort of the philosophy of how do I make my content and my message helpful for the person that I'm trying to help and not
Yeah.
myself, right? I
Yeah.
think that's the pivot I make. And I think a lot of startup founders and a lot of people start by doing things and it kind of goes back to how you're spending your days doing things that are productive to you or productive to the people that you're trying to serve. So I love
Yeah.
that. And I think that's a really good place to sort of wind down and land the plane. But first of all, I want to say a huge thank you coming on today.
Pleasure.
Working through this dialogue is something that I think a lot of people do daily. And the fact that you're someone who's accomplished a lot in both. Um, and like even still using it as part of your differentiator is something I think will appeal to a lot of people. And it's helped me think about it. It's helped me reflect on my past careers and job roles, taking my internships, my 2 to 3 years in business, the clients we've served, and how I can double click on the areas that I want to lean more into. So I think it's going to be a really helpful episode. But where can people get in touch with you, learn more about the book? We have it right here in the background as well, the only green thing on the screen. Um,
There was a
but
design decision so that I said, when I design this book, if it's on somebody's bookshelf, I want to be able to spot it. It
Mhm.
was almost green with a white spot. I said, no, I don't want a white spot. I want green and black so I can spot it from a distance away. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I see plenty of, I mean, it matches with your screen. So, but yeah, where can people continue the conversation, get in touch if they want to learn more from you or take the next step?
Yeah, so my main website is aleejudge.com, the letter A, LEEJUDGE.com. And the book is at aleejudge.com/cash, the name of the book. And then my agency is Content Monster with the A on the end, content, MONSTA, contentmonster.com. And so those are my two worlds, contentmonster.com and aleejudge.com.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on
Oh, and
today, man.
connect on LinkedIn. It's my favorite social place to hang out. So connect on LinkedIn too.